Back to that in just a minute, but let's begin with an eye to the White House, where the presidential push for deportations meets the Salvadoran president taking U.S. deportation flights into his country. So we're talking about President Bukele of El Salvador. You know, since March, his country has accepted more than 200 Venezuelan deportees into that Salvadoran maximum security gang prison. And among them, this man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia. There's his photo. Maryland resident, Salvadoran citizen who had an immigration court order to prevent his deportation back to his native country. So the U.S. Supreme Court has called for his return to the United States. But listen to what was said at the White House from both leaders about whether that could actually happen.
The Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously, stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the President could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador, who again is a member of MS-13, which, as I'm sure you understand, rapes little girls, murders women, murders children, is engaged in the most barbaric activities in the world, and I can promise you if he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
So you don't plan
But
to
the
ask for
Supreme Court's asking to...
Is that
What was the ruling in the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0
in our favor.
in our favor against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual at El Salvador's sole discretion was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time.
Well,
no version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it, per the court, can only be directed to him.
I asked
¿Se lo liberaría, Presidente Bukele?
Can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm suppose you're not suggesting that I smuggle terrorists into the United States, right?
It's always
how can I smuggle? How can I return him to the United States? Like I smuggled him.
How can I return him, he says. So let's bring in CBS News chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes. Nancy, based on what we heard, it doesn't sound like high confidence Kilmar Abrego Garcia will be coming back to the United States.
Right. You heard not only from Stephen Miller there in the White House, but also the president and the Secretary of State and the Attorney General. And they all were singing from the same hymnal, basically saying that they don't believe that they are required to bring him back to the United States, even though he may have been sent in error. And if he were to be returned to the United States by the president of El Salvador, who was sitting right there, they said they would simply turn around and send him right back. They said he will not live here in the United States with his wife and child, both American citizens, again. And for the president of El Salvador's part, he was equally forceful. He said that he is not in the habit of releasing terrorists from the infamous prison where Abrego Garcia is being held right now. And he said there's no point in him sending him to the U.S. if he is as dangerous as the White House says. Keep in mind that administration officials have not provided any proof that he is dangerous or that he's a human trafficker, as they allege. They say that they have information that they have not shown to the public that indicates that this man, who is a construction worker, a union member, is actually quite dangerous and a member of MS-13.
Nancy, this is also the president's first meeting of many with world leaders to negotiate and talk about tariffs. Did the tariff agenda come up today in this particular meeting?
Not in that pool spray, as we call it, that you just showed, where the president and his El Salvador counterpart were taking questions from reporters. But earlier in the day, I did have a chance to speak to Kevin Hassett, one of the president's top economic advisors, about what we've been hearing from businesses around the U.S., particularly businesses that import their goods from China and are suddenly facing these massive tariffs on Chinese goods, and saying they don't think that they can last very long financially in this environment. Take a listen to what he had to say about that.
There are thousands of small and medium-sized American businesses that rely on Chinese exports. How is the White House recommending that they stay afloat if they suddenly have to pay 145% more to get their goods out of port?
The Secretary of Commerce in particular has a massive team of people, and also the Small Business Administrator, that are taking calls of small businesses, understanding their concerns, and thinking about how best to address them, including by finding other suppliers that are not on the current list that China is on.
They say that they have tried to move their production out of China, but that's a process that takes 6 months, maybe a year. What do they do until then?
It depends on which product, and that's why there are different experts helping the people.
So you heard him say that the Small Business Administration and the Department of Commerce are hearing these complaints. They're trying to figure out what to do. We have reached out to the SBA. No details yet on what exactly they will do to help these companies that have been telling us that really they can't survive very long at all under this current tariff regime.
CBS News Chief White House Correspondent Nancy Cordes, great to talk to you. We hope to see you back here on CBS News 24/7 a little bit later this week. So let's turn now to CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman. Katrina, moments ago, we heard the Salvadoran president talk about this case. He said that Mr. Abrego Garcia likely couldn't be found to be sent back. What's the readout there from that meeting?
Reed, as you and Nancy were just talking about, at the moment, it is not looking promising for Mr. Abrego Garcia's return, but this is in spite of a very firm order from the district court judge last Friday, Reed, that the administration, the government, take steps to return Mr. Abrego Garcia to the United States. On Friday, she told the government that they needed to give her daily status reports about Mr. Abrego Garcia's whereabouts, what steps they had taken to bring him back, and what steps they would be taking to bring him back. We have now seen a very public statement from President Trump that they are not even trying to bring Mr. Abrego Garcia back to the United States, and from President Bukele that he doesn't feel that it's his responsibility either. There's supposed to be a hearing tomorrow in this case, Reed, where I expect there will be very sharp questions from the district court judge, because she seems to have a very different interpretation of the Supreme Court's ruling than the Trump administration does. She viewed their order that the Trump administration, or that she could order them to facilitate Mr. Abrego Garcia's return, as them having to take steps to bring him back. The administration has clearly interpreted it otherwise. I think it's also important to note that in that ruling, the Supreme Court, all 9 justices, agreed on one thing in particular, that in these cases there needs to be judicial review. That's an opportunity for notice and a hearing, neither of which Mr. Abrego Garcia received before he was taken to El Salvador.
Well, there's the other high-profile legal battle that's over the case regarding Mr. Khalil. Tell us where that case is right now.
So, Reed, on Friday, an immigration judge in Louisiana determined that Mr. Khalil could be removed from the United States. Now, his lawyers have until April 23rd to seek another form of relief. That could be asylum, withholding of removal. They're also continuing to pursue their habeas case. That's the federal case in New Jersey, Reed, where they're still trying to argue for his release. Because one thing that the immigration judge said could not be debated in her court is the constitutionality of the statute that the government is using to deport Mr. Khalil. That's something that has to happen in federal court. So his lawyers are still trying to prevent this from happening on 2 fronts, both in the immigration court and in the federal court.
All right, so 2 updates on 2 cases. Let's tee up a third. The case in Vermont, another detainment case, that student that the Trump administration accused of being a Hamas supporter. What's going on in that case today?
Today, there was a hearing in that case that's for Ramesa Ozturk. And what her lawyers are arguing is, one, they want her released from this ICE detention center in Louisiana, where Mr. Khalil is also being held down there. They are also arguing that her arrest was unconstitutional, Reed. And a really important thing they're still trying to determine, which has been an issue in many of these cases, is jurisdiction. They want this case heard in Vermont. She was originally arrested in Massachusetts, brought to Vermont, and then taken to this detention center in Louisiana. So today in court, they were arguing that the proceedings should continue in Vermont and that she should be released from that detention center in Louisiana and allowed to go home. One thing her lawyers brought up in court is that it's very unusual for someone to be detained when their visa is being revoked, Reed. So they're arguing she should not have to spend any more time there.
All right, Katrina Kaufman, thank you so much for the updates on all of those cases. We appreciate it.